عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, so I was asked to sub in for our beloved Imam Majid for this session of Ihya. So we're in the section on sabr and shukr. These two attributes of Iman, they're usually brought together in a lot of books on akhlaq. Jazakallah khair. Ibn Qayyim brings them together in one of his books. Imam Ghazali brings them together here. So this is in the Rub' al-Munjiyat, the section on the characteristics of a person's character that save you from the hellfire. and so patience and gratitude are very complementary in that aspect. So we're still, this is still the sort of discussion on patience, and today we're going to read the section Faslu Thalith, Bayan Kawni Sabr Nisful Iman. Patience, what does it mean? Explaining the statement that patience is half of faith, right? So we have texts that sort of indicate this, and what Imam Ghazali is going to do in this section is he's going to literally explain, almost like mathematically, and this is from the genius of Imam Ghazali, is he can take, it's almost like he has this primitive AI when it comes to psycho-spiritual. No one can talk about this type of thing the way he talks about it. So he's going to literally break down how it's half, almost mathematically. But then he's going to tell us none of that matters. What matters ultimately is that you understand that al-furu' yatba' al-usul. What he means by that is that essentially, literally, the branches follow the roots. If you understand what Iman represents, then you'll understand its manifestation into all of its different branches, in which the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says there are 70 some odd branches of Iman. And so patience is just one. But gratitude is another one, right? Hilm, forbearance, is another one. Shuja', bravery, is another one. Iffa, right? Chastity is another one. So, broad overview, that's a broad overview. So now let's try to read as much as we can, word for word, and then just kind of translate and discuss. And, this is informal. If at any point there's a comment or a correction, doesn't have to be a question, it could be a correction or a question, just jump in. Okay, Bismillah. يقول المصنف رحمه الله اعلم أن الإيمان تارة يختص في إطلاقه بالتصديقات بأصول الدين وتارة يختص بالأعمال الصالحة الصادرة منها. This is a debate between Hanafis and non-Hanafis. What he says is, know that faith. So first of all, he's just going to talk about faith. Sometimes when people talk about faith, they're talking about tasdiqat bi usul ad-din, confirming the basic principles of religion. When the angel Jibreel came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in a hadith that is authentic, mentioned by Imam Nawawi in his second hadith of the Arba'in collection, the angel Jibreel says, "Akhbirni anil iman." Tell me about iman. What does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ say? أن تؤمن بالله, believe in Allah, وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. These are the usul of the deen. Belief in Allah, the angels, the books, the messengers, the day of judgment, divine decree, the good and the bad of it. So the Hanafis, they say all Iman is confirming that. Okay? It has nothing to do with action. And so if a person believes in that, then they have Iman. Okay? But other non-Hanafis, Shafi'is, Malikis, they would say, no, it also, the next thing he says here, يَخْتَصُ بِالْأَعْمَالِ صَالِحًا. It is manifested and bore witness to through good deeds. Okay? And then, therefore, they say faith goes up and down. And the reflection of that is in your deeds. But the Hanafis, they say faith doesn't go up and down. So that's a debate. So he's basically, and of course, Imam Ghazali is a Shafi'i, so he's going to start now from the second definition, where faith is linked to deeds, and then he's going to take it from there. Okay? So, وَتَارَةً يُطْلَقُ عَلَيْهَا جَمِيعًا, and sometimes people refer to faith as encompassing both. وَلِلْمَعَارِفِ أَبْوَابٌ وَلِلْأَعْمَالِ أَبْوَابٌ وَلِلْاشْتِمَالِ لَفْظِ الْإِيمَانِ عَلَى جَمِيعِهَا كَانَ الْإِيمَانِ نَيْفًا وَسَبْعِينَ بَابًا. Okay? So, there are different ways to understand faith. There are different ways to understand deeds. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has told us that there are some 70 some odd doors to understanding Iman. Okay? So, واختلاف هذه الإطلاقات ذكرناه في كتاب القواعد العقائد من رب العبادات. Now, specifically, all of these nuanced differences in how Iman is described, we described that in our previous book, right, on Aqidah, which is called Qawa'id al-Aqa'id. Okay, that's the second book, the rules of beliefs. That's the second book of Ihya Ulumuddin. How long ago was that read? How many years? 20 years ago? Okay, so I don't think anybody remembers that, but it's there. ولكن الصبر نصف الإيمان باعتبارين. But regardless, patience is half of faith from two different considerations. In other words, he's going to say, we can say that patience is half of Iman, okay, from two different considerations, right? أحدهما, one of them, أن يطلق على تصديقات والأعمال جميعا فيكون للإيمان ركنان أحدهما اليقين والآخر الصبر. So the first way we can look at it, let's just do an algorithm. He's saying this. Let's put Iman here, okay? And then let's say that Iman can break down into two parts. One of them is, what does he say? Yaqeen, your faith, okay? Or the things that you are certain about in faith. And the other one are good deeds, okay? So what he says, one of them is the things that you're certain about in faith, and the other one is patience, okay? So patience is half of faith. So you have Iman here, and then you have Yaqeen, the things that you're certain about with regards to Iman. So like in the Hadith, Jibreel, angels, books. And then you have deeds. In other words, like patience is what's going to give you the deeds that reflect that. In other words, you have certain, in secularism, basically in secular thought, you have your own beliefs, but you don't bring that into public. Islam goes completely against that. Say, okay, you have the things that you have yaqeen about, okay? But then that's going to affect how you act, okay? So Imam Ghazali is saying, okay, you have the things that you are certain about, but then everything else is patience, because he's going to explain why here in a second. والمراد باليقين المعارف القطعية الحاصلة بهداية الله تعالى عبده إلى أصول الدين. والمراد بالصبر العمل بمقتضي اليقين إذ اليقين يعرفه أن المعصية ضارة والطاعة نافعة ولا يمكن ترك المعصية والمواظبة على الطاعة إلا بالصبر. Okay, so basically he's saying, if we say that Iman, part of it is yaqeen, then the other part, okay, is sabr, patience, such that yaqeen tells you that good deeds benefit you, bad deeds harm you. You have to have patience to follow through on the good deeds and avoid the bad deeds. Okay? So it's a basic formula where faith then becomes broken down into two things, and half of it is patience, right? وهو استعمال باعث الدين في قهر باعث الهوى والكسل. In other words, this is saying, or essentially defining patience as this ba'ith. It's hard to translate ba'ith. This cause or motivation or resistance that rises up within you, okay, to fight unlawful desires, okay, and to overwhelm unlawful desires. فَيَكُونُ الصَّبْرُ نِصْفُ الْإِيمَانِ بِهَذَا الِاعْتِبَارِ. So, patience is half of faith from this consideration, okay, that faith basically is stuff you believe in, and then it's patience, and patience allows you to act according to the stuff you believe in. Either doing what is good to benefit you, or avoiding what is harmful with regards to what is haram. ولهذا جمع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بينهما فقال إِنَّ مِنْ أَقَلَّ مَا أُوتِيتُمْ الْيَقِينَ وَعَزِيمَةُ الصَّبْرِ. This hadith has, the takhrij of this hadith is that it has no real origin. It's likely mawdu'a, fabricated. But there's no harm in mentioning it in the sense that it doesn't affect your aqidah. Basically, what the supposed hadith is saying is that from the least of what you have been given in terms of your faith, right, is the pinnacle of patience and certainty of what you believe in. But there's no authentic sanad for that hadith. Al-i'tibaru thani. Now that's one way we can say. Remember, at the end of this, he's going to say none of this matters, but he's still going to give an explanation. But al-i'tibaru thani. The other way we can say that patience is half of faith is أن يطلق على الأحوال المثمرة للأعمال لا على المعارف وعند ذلك ينقسم جميع ما يلاقيه العبد إلى ما ينفعه في الدنيا والآخرة أو يضره فيهما. We can say that faith is essentially how you act in the world or how you act according to how the world acts on you. How you act or how you react. Faith is all how you act or how you react. Okay? And if that's the case, you're either being benefited by your actions or your reactions, or you're being harmed by your actions or your reactions. And what he's going to say is وَلَهُ بِالْإِضَافَةِ إِلَى مَا يَضُرُّهُ حَالُ الصَّبْرِ وَبِالْإِضَافَةِ إِلَى مَا يَنْفَعُهُ حَالُ الشُّكْرِ. And if there's something that harms you, whether it's something you're doing or being done to, that's where you show patience. And if there's something that benefits you, whether it's something that you're doing or being done to you, there you show gratitude. Either patience or gratitude. Thus, patience is what? Half of faith. This is one of the two. So we can look at patience being half of faith according to this way. Okay, according only to either how you react or act. And of course, the Hanafis, they'll say that, there's a difference between Hanafis and non-Hanafis. Faith is just tasdiqat bil usul ad-din. And the non-Hanafis, they say, no, it's based on actions as well. So there's that, and of course the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. How strange is it, the affair of the believer, right? Everything of his affair is good for him. Because if good afflicts him, he's grateful, and that's good for him. And if bad afflicts him, he's patient, and that's good for him, right? So, the mu'min, or the person of iman, there's two parts in this hadith. For the mu'min, or the person of iman, there's a sabr part and a shukr part. So from this consideration, sabr is half of faith, right? Okay. فَيَكُونَ الشُّكْرُ أَحَدُ شَطْرَيْ الْإِيمَانِ. So gratitude is one of the two halves of iman. بِهَذَا الْإِعْتِبَارِ كَمَا أَنَّ الْيَقِينَ أَحَدُ الشَّطْرَيْنِ بِاعْتِبَارِ الْأَوَّلِ. Just like yaqeen was half of iman, according to the previous definition. And what he meant by yaqeen is the ma'arif, the things you believe in, or the tasdiqat, right, inside. So, وَهَذَا النَّظْرُ وَبِهَذَا النَّظْرُ. And according to this theory, right, قال ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه الإيمان نصفان نصف صبر ونصف الشكر. He doesn't mention the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, but it's also there. Ibn Mas'ud said it himself, Iman is two parts. One, half of it is patience, the other half is gratitude. وَقَدْ يَرْفَعُ أَيْضًا إِلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So he's saying this from Ibn Mas'ud, it could be a hadith marfu'. Hadith marfu' are hadith that are attributed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but we don't have a final link in the chain to confirm that. But anyway, we have another hadith that I just mentioned, where he says his affair, all of it is good, and talks about patience and gratitude. وَلَمَّا كَانَ الصَّبْرُ صَبْرًا عَنْ بَاعِثِ الْهَوَى بِثَبَاتِ بَاعِثِ الدِّينِ وَكَانَ بَاعِثُ الْهَوَى قِسْمَيْنِ باعث مِنْ جِهَةِ الشَّهْوَى وَبَاعِثٌ مِنْ جِهَةِ الْغَضَبِ. Okay. So this is like his AI algorithm here. Okay, so let's back up. So now that he's saying And given that, patience, okay, we define patience as this resistance or this energy that arises within you to resist against unlawful desires. Let's not translate that as desires. Say those appetites, okay, or those inclinations that patience resists, okay. They're one of two types. Either it's shahwa li talab al-ladid. It's either, your inclination is either to an appetite for something that is like something that your stomach wants, right? Or an appetite, like a sexual appetite. So there's that version of inclination. Or al-ghadab, or there's anger, right? So now he's going to say, وَكَانَ صَوْمُ صَبْرًا عَنْ مَقْتَدِ الشَّهْوَةِ فَقَط. Fasting is a type of patience only against the inclinations of the stomach and sexual desire. Okay? So inclinations are two parts as well. What your stomach and your sexual organs seek, but also anger. That's another sort of inclination. Okay? So what he's saying here is that patience is only for there's a patience for the inclinations of the stomach and the sexual organs, right? And that is fasting. That's where you gain the patience from that. Okay, so he says based on that, right? Based on that, let me back up here. وكان صوم صبرا عن مقتضي الشهوة فقط وهي شهوة البطن والفرج دون مقتضي الغضب, right? So fasting teaches you how to deal with your inclination, your sexual and food inclinations, not your anger necessarily. بهذا الاعتبار الصوم نصف الصبر. So we can say based on this that fasting is half of patience. Okay, it's like he's like making an algorithm here. Basically, what he's saying is that faith has two parts. Iman has shukr and it has sabr. This sabr can be directed against anger, and there's a mechanism for that. It's using your rational, but he doesn't get here. Okay, it's using your rational. Or this sabr can be directed against appetites, like sexual appetites and food-based appetite. So that, the tool that he uses for that is fasting. Okay? So given that there's these two different inclinations, right? And sabr addresses both of them. Therefore, he's going to say that fasting, which addresses one of those halves, is 1/4 of iman, because you have patience, which is half of iman, and then shahwa is half of what sabr goes to. So half of 1/2 is 1/4. So he's basically saying that fasting is 1/4 of iman based on. And again, this is okay. The first time you probably read it just goes over the head like that because it sounds like a mathematical equation. Again, this is his style. He breaks everything down, even the stuff he doesn't think is important. Okay, because his autobiography, he said this was how I was trained from my youth, and then at the end of it he'll say what's really important. لأن كمال الصبر بالصبر عن دواعي الشهوة ودواعي الغضب جميعا. Because full patience is what you use against appetites and anger together, right? فيكون الصوم بهذا الاعتبار ربع الإيمان. So fasting in this sense is 1/4 of iman. فكان ينبغي أن تفهم تقديرات الشرع بحدود الأعمال والأحوال ونسبتها إلى الإيمان. So in this sense, we need to understand what he's saying. The Sharia in the sense of how it talks about actions and states as a result of those actions, essentially. والأصل فيه أن تعرف كثرة أبواب الإيمان فإن الإيمان يطلق على وجوه مختلفة. But the basic point here is that the word iman can be used synonymously for multiple different terms. Okay? So now he's going to get into that a little bit more. So the next part, فصل الرابع بيان الأسامي التي تتجدد للصبر بالإضافة إلى ما عنه الصبر. Okay? So in other words, when you take this faith now, and you use the iman that arises from it in different contexts in life, this patience, use it in different contexts in life, there's going to arise different names for what you are doing. Okay, and you'll see what he means here in a second. But essentially at the end of it, you can say all of it is iman. These are the branches that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is talking about. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it is, but he has a different theory on anger. Imam Ghazali has this psychosocial theory in general, okay, where he says basically that the aql is the tool that you use against the ghadab, right? And so you have these forces, right? You have shahwa, right, which is your desires and inclinations, and then you have the ghadab, right? And so these are addressed in different ways. It's not that the aql doesn't address the sexual part, and it's not that fasting doesn't address the ghadab part. But these are addressed mainly through two different ways, right? But no, definitely the ahadith are there. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says in another hadith, "Inna shaitan yajri min ibn Adam majra dam." Shaitan flows through the human being via his blood. And so what does fasting do? It lowers your blood pressure. Just think about that for a moment. It lowers your blood pressure. And if shaitan is flowing through you, when your blood pressure gets high and you're angry, then he's got more access to you, right? You know, so if your heart rate's racing and your blood pressure's up and shaitan flows through your blood, right? Now, that may not be literal. There may be something majazi there. There may be something metaphorical there, but there's still a link there, right? Well, fasting protects against that anger, right? Because it lowers your blood pressure. It lowers your heart rate, right? So it's a shield. As-siyamu junnah. It's another hadith. Fasting is a shield. It's a shield against all kinds of misbehavior. But he's trying to work a certain, like, psycho-spiritual theory and how the nafs is addressed in different ways, right? But in general, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, fasting addresses anger just as well. So he says here in the next section, any other comments? That was a good question. So he says, اعلم أن الصبر ضربان أحدهما ضرب بدني. So now, let's talk a little bit more about patience now, he's saying. So first we talked about how patience is a part of Iman and how you can understand it as a part of Iman. But now let's just talk about patience itself. Okay, what exactly is patience? Now he's going to go into details about what patience itself is. First of all, he says, there's a patience of the body. Then he's going to say there's a patience of the soul. But the patience of the body, okay, he's going to clarify here. كتحمل المشاق بالبدن وثبات عليها. So, for example, if you lift something heavy or you bear a very heavy weight on your body, okay, that's a type of, if you're lifting weights, there's a type of physical patience there. No doubt, there's a physical patience there. Or if you're in the construction site, you know, and it's hot outside and you're sweating and you're lifting concrete, you know, cylinders and whatnot, that requires a type of bodily patience, right? وهو إما بالفعل كتعاطي الأعمال الشاقة وإما من العبادات أو من غيرها. Or that physical patience could be in, you know, worship, acts of worship, could be fasting, could be hajj, right? وإما بالاحتمال كالصبر عن الضرب الشديد. Or you might get hit, or you might get whipped, or you might be under some kind of والمرض العظيم, you might be sick. That's a type of physical patience as well. والجراحات الهائلة, cuts or wounds, that are big. وَذَلِكَ قَدْ يَكُونُ مَحْمُودًا إِذَا وَافَقَ الشَّرْعَ. That may be praiseworthy, that type of physical patience, that may be praiseworthy if it coincides with the Sharia. Meaning, that is something that the Sharia stamped validation on. Because there's a lot of types of physical harm that you may be patient about that you're not rewarded for. In fact, you may be punished for. Okay? So there are, I don't know, people who cut themselves, or, they get a big tattoo and it's very painful, or they get piercings that they shouldn't be getting and it's very painful. And they're patient. They're very patient, but that's not something that Allah asks you to do. In fact, it may be a type of a sin, right? So that type of physical patience may be praiseworthy, may not be praiseworthy, right? But he says, وَلَكِنْ الْمَحْمُودَ التَّامِ, the real praiseworthy aspect of patience, هُوَ الضَّرْبُ الْآخَرِ, it's another type. وَهُوَ الصَّبْرُ النَّفْسِ, this is the patience of the nafs, right? عَنِ الْمُشْتَهِيَاتِ الطَّبْعَ وَالْمَقْتَدِيَاتِ الْهَوَى, patience of the nafs that fights against the inclinations of the hawa that are not correct according to the Sharia. ثم هذا الضرب إن كان صبرا على شهوة البطن والفرج سمي عفة. Now he's going to talk about how patience in different aspects of your life in this regard, meaning the patience of the nafs, when you apply it in different aspects of life, you will find different names given to it. Okay? But at the end he's going to say these are all the branches of Iman. Okay? So, when patience is employed, utilized against a person's incorrect sexual desires, that is what we call iffa. What is iffa? Chastity. Okay? So, patience applied here is called iffa, right? وإن كان عن الاحتمال المكروه اختلفت أساميه عند الناس باختلاف المكروه الذي غلب عليه الصبر فإن كان في مصيبة اقتصر على اسم الصبر وتضاده حالة تسمى الجزع والحلى. Or if it's just in regards to bearing a calamity, let's just call that patience in general, okay? And then the opposite of that is when a person is impatient, and that might look, what does that look like? وَهُوَ إِطْلَاقُ الدَّاعِ الْهَوَى لِيَسْتَرْسِلْ فِي الرَّفْعِ صوت, they raise their voice, وَضَرْبِ الْخُدُودِ, they smack their cheeks, like when a calamity happens. A person screams, hits themselves like this, وَالشَّقِّ الْجُيُوبِ, they rip their clothes. That's impatience. That's what impatience looks like in a calamity. If you cry, that's not impatience. Basically, if there's a death and a calamity and you cry and you need someone to hug you and you hug a family member and you cry, that's not impatience. That's normal taba. That's normal emotional reaction, right? But he's saying, it can get to a level that then we would call that jaza'a, hala'a, instability in a person's in a person's self-control, right? And that's when you're pulling your hair out and you're hitting yourself and you're ripping your clothes, right? And some of that may be more cultural, but وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي حَرْبٍ. Now let's say you're in a situation of war, okay? And you apply patience, right? وَمُقَاتَلَةِ سُمِيَ شُجَاعًا. That we call bravery, okay? So what did we call it when it comes to resisting inappropriate sexual desires? We called it chastity, iffa. What do we call patience when it's employed in the battlefield? We call it shuja'a. And he says the opposite of it, yudaduhu al-jubn. The opposite of it is being a coward when you run away, okay? So that's the opposite of patience there. So notice what he's doing. He's saying patience, he's saying, look, we already showed how either you take this view or that view, essentially patience is a big part of Iman. But Iman is applied to life, right? So this patience, it needs to be applied to life. So when we apply it to life here, we call it this. And when we apply it to life here, we call it that. Look, he's going to keep going. So, وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي كَظْمِ الْغَيْظِ, a person is raging in anger, and then you hold your anger back, سُمِيَ حِلْمًا, we call that hilm, which is forbearance, okay? So in this situation, patience will have another name, okay? وَيُضَادُهُ التَّذَمُّرُ, okay? The opposite of it is when you're just like grumpy, right? وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي نائبة من نوائب الزمان, and if it's in a calamity that is مضجرة, tedious, annoying, سمي سعة الصدر. I don't know what he means by this. He says we would call that the expansion of the heart. I don't know what he means by that. ويضاده الضجر وتبرم وضيق الصدر. The opposite of it is the constricting of the chest. What do you have there? Does someone have a translation of that? What do you have as the translation? And if it's from the disasters of time, misfortune, yeah. Expansion, long suffering, interesting. Sa'atu sadr, yeah. Vexation, okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So there's that. So what did he call Sa'atu Sadr? He called it long suffering. Interesting. I think the translator there struggled as well. I don't know what the long suffering there means either. Okay, but وَإِن كَانَ فِي إِخْفَاءِ كَلَامٍ, if someone entrusts you to a secret, okay, right? And they say, don't tell anyone. What do you want to do right away? You want to tell everyone. It takes patience. It takes patience to hold that secret, which is a trust. Holding secrets is a trust, right? So he says in that situation we call that kitmanu sir, وَسُمِيَ صَاحِبُهُ كَتُومًا. We call that person the hider of the secret, okay? That situation, patience is called this, right? So you might be put in a situation of war. You might be put in a situation where you're in an argument with a spouse and you're angry, right? You might be put in a situation where, like Yusuf, alayhi salam, you're tested with a sexual desire, right? All of those situations have a reaction that patience applies itself in. And all of those reactions have a different name. You see? So he's going down the list like this. So what else? So he says, وَإِن كَانَ عَنْ فُضُولِ الْعَيْشِ سُمِيَ زُهْدًا. And if patience is applied to where you don't have much in life to live with, you don't have a lot of possessions, okay? We call that asceticism, okay? That's called zuhud, right? وَيُضَادُهُ الْحِرْص, and the opposite of that is greed, right? So patience in not having a lot of material stuff, there's a type of patience there. We call that zuhud. وَإِن كَانَ صَبْرًا عَلَى قَدْرٍ يَسِيرٍ مِنَ الْحُدُودِ سُمِيَ قَنَاعًا, right? And if you only have a little bit of wealth, right, and you learn how to live with that little bit of wealth, we call that patience applied there, we call that qana'a, contentment. Right? وَيُضَادُهُ الشَّرَّ فَأَكْثَرُ أَخْلَاقِ الْإِيمَانِ دَاخِلٌ فِي الصَّبْرِ. So this is the point. It's to get to here. Okay? Most of the attributes of Iman are aspects of patience. Whether it's on the battlefield, whether it's in the argument with the spouse, whether it's in living a life of poverty or living a life of lack of material possibilities, right? Or it's in forgiveness, or it's in forbearance. Patience is manifesting itself in so many different colors all throughout life. But these are all manifestations of Iman through patience, okay? So, ولذلك لما سئل عليه السلام مرة عن الإيمان قال هو الصبر. So this hadith, it doesn't give a grading of it. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that faith in of itself is patience. لأنه أكثر أعماله وعزها كما قال الحج عرفة. That's an authentic hadith. Just like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Hajj is Arafah. In other words, Hajj is more than Arafah. Okay, Hajj is tawaf, Hajj is sa'i, Hajj is Nahr, Hajj is Mina, Hajj is Muzdalifah. It's a lot of different things, but the main thing, one of the most important things, without it you would not have Hajj, is what? Arafat. That's what he means when he says Imanu Sabr. Right? So قد جمع الله تعالى أقسام ذلك وسمي الكل صبرا فقال تعالى, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has combined a lot of these in a verse where he says وَالصَّابِرِينَ فِي الْبَأْسَاءِ, and the people who are patient with calamities, وَالضَّرَّاء, and people who are patient with poverty, right? وَحِينَ الْبَأْسِ, the حِينَ الْبَأْسِ is when, you know, like in the movies where you have a war, like you have a war and there's an army here and an army here, and they're running, rah, and they're yelling, and the sword, right when the swords clash, that's حِينَ الْبَأْسِ. There's a patience right there too, you know? So وَحِينَ الْبَأْسِ, in other words, in war, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا, those are the people who are truthful with regards to their faith, right? وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُتَّقُونَ, and those are the people of taqwa. So then he has a final, we'll just end here, last paragraph. He has a final sort of ta'liq here on everything that he said in this section. So he says, فَإِذًا, therefore, thus. So this is the important part. When Imam Ghazali says فَإِذًا, that's the important part, okay? All of the math up to here, that's not that important, okay? But this is the important part. هذه أقسام الصبر باختلافات متعلقاتها. These aspects of patience are all different parts relative to how they're applied to life. They're different aspects, right? ومن يأخذ المعاني من الأسامي يظن أن هذه الأحوال مختلفة في ذواتها وحقائقها. And if you try to look at just names and descriptions of things, if you look at, we talked about how patience is a manifestation of forbearance, for example. If you just look at forbearance, separate from faith, and you look at bravery, which is another thing we mentioned, separate from faith, and you look at chastity, separate from, you look at these things all separately, then you might think, that all of these things are different in and of themselves. You might, if you disconnect it to its root, which is iman, you might think that they're all different things in and of themselves, right? Which is how secularism would want you to think, right? وَمِنْ حَيْثِ رَأَى الْأَسَامِي مُخْتَلِفَةً. And so that person would just see different names. That's all they would see. They would see the name of forbearance, they would see chastity, they would see bravery, they would see contentment, but they wouldn't see how they're all linked. Okay? وَالَّذِي يَسْلُكَ الطَّرِيقَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. But the person who follows the straight path. وَيَنْظُرُ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ. This is farasa. And he looks with the light of God. In other words, God has guided that person. يَلْحَظْ الْمَعَانِي الْأَوَّلًا. That person will look at the root of these things first. He'll look at where these things come from. What is their source, first and foremost? So that person will be looking at forbearance. They'll be looking at bravery. They'll be looking at chastity. But they'll be saying, how are all these things linked? What is the source that links all these things, right? That's how a believer, the person who looks with the light of God, that's how they will look, right? فَيَطَّلَعْ عَلَى حَقَائِقِهَا ثُمَّ يُلَاحِظْ الْأَسَامِي فَإِنَّهَا وُضِعَتْ دَالَةً عَلَى الْمَعَانِي. Then that person will notice all of these different things, all these different names that people apply to aspects of good character, such as forbearance, such as bravery, such as contentment, etc., etc. That person will notice they're all linked. They all come first and foremost to an underlying source of meaning, right? فَالْمَعَانِي, and then this is a principle that he gives us here, a mabda, right? A principle. Meanings, هِيَ الْأُصُولِ. Those meanings of, essentially of faith, that is the root, okay? وَالْأَلْفَاظ هِيَ تَوَابِعَ. And the words that people use, okay, those are the branches. Think about the metaphor that Allah gives in the Quran. In Surah Ibrahim. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةً كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ. Look how Allah gives a good parable like a good tree. What is the good parable? It's iman. La ilaha illallah. That good tree, asluha thabit. The root is firm, وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. The branches pierce into the heavens. Then what does this tree do? This tree whose root is firm, root is la ilaha illallah. That's what this ayah means. Right? تُؤْتِي أُكَلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا. It gives its fruit at all times. What is the fruit of iman? Well, it's all the things we just mentioned. Bravery. Patience manifested here is bravery. Patience manifested here is iffa, chastity. Patience manifested here is contentment. Patience manifested here is asceticism. Patience manifested here is forbearance. Those are the fruits of the tree. All of those are the fruits. Those are the fruits of iman. So what Imam Ghazali is saying, a person might look at that person might look at all these different fruits and say, all these apples, they're all disconnected. You got an apple here, but a person of faith will say, no, they all came from the same source. They all came from the same root, and that is la ilaha illallah. You see, that's what he's saying. You have to look at the root and understand how the branches emanate from the root and not vice versa, right? And by the way, there's a little subtle hint here, I think, to a problem that a lot of young Muslims have and how they're educated about religion, right? Because a lot of times we teach, or we ourselves have been taught, about the distant branches of faith. Prayer, fasting, here's what to do, how to do. What to do, how to do. Okay? Here's zakat, here's what it is, and here's how you do it. But there isn't a lot of focus on teaching about the root. Who is Allah? Who is your Lord? Right? Who are you doing this for? That's the root. That's the asal. And if, as a focus of tarbiyah, if children were given that first and taught who Allah is, these are the names of Allah. You know, this is the creation of Allah. This is the artistry of Allah. Right? Look, this is the guidance of Allah. This is the mercy of Allah. And that gets instilled. That's the root. That's the asal. That's the ma'ani. From there, naturally, branches will come out. And from there, naturally, fruit will come out. Then you can say, this fruit here, this is salah. This fruit here, this is saum. And then you have asluha thab. You have a tree who cannot be uprooted because its roots are firm. And it will give that child that will grow up, that mu'min will grow up to give fruit at all times, which is good deeds. Right? And so, وَمَنْ يَطْلُبْ الْأُصُولِ مِنَ التَّوَابِعِ لَابُدْ وَأَنْ يَزَّلْ. But if all you do is you just focus on the branches and you don't have the root, you don't have that asal, that person's faith will eventually go away. Right? They'll eventually go away. I think one of the poets had this line in his poem. It was a poem on Aqidah. مَنْ تَقَلَّدَ فِي التَّوْحِيدِ فَإِيمَانُهُ لَا يَخْلَى مِنْ تَرْدِيدٍ. Whoever just copies in faith, their faith will never be free from hesitation and doubt. Right? Because all you're doing is you're just copying the branches, but you don't really have that stem, that root, right? وبهذا يقول الله تعالى أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أم من يمشي سويا على صراط المستقيم. Is the one who walks with his head down like this, like the one who walks straight up, you know, on the straight path. فإن الكفار لم يغلطوا فيما غلطوا فيه إلا بمثل هذه الانعكاسات. The disbelievers didn't go into excess the way they've gone into excess, except with flipping the realities of things, like the case I just gave you right now, right? نسأل الله حسن التوفيق بكرمه ولطفه ونقف هنا إن شاء الله ونكتفي بهذا القدر. نسأل الله التوفيق وأن يعلمنا فيما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمنا ويزدنا علما. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So we'll pause here. So starting next week, the next section, الفصل الخامس, بيان أقسام الصبر بحسب اختلاف القوة والضعف. Explaining the types of patience when considering different levels of strength and weakness in a person. So any comments or questions about anything we've discussed? Any corrections? Few corrections? Yes? Okay. Yeah, that's the one I didn't. Long. Sa'atu sadr, I think. Mm-hmm. No, we don't, yeah. But that's interesting. In England, you do use it. Maybe, yeah, because that was what he was. Na'iba min nawa'ib az-zaman is kind of like that, yeah, long suffering, you know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. No. It's like the Palestinians. Yeah. Yeah. And subhanAllah, like, you know, like, now that you said that, it makes me think, like, a lot of people have looked at Islam in the last couple years. They've even become Muslim because of the iman of the Palestinians. And where does that iman go? Long suffering. Because if patience is nisful iman, they've cultivated so much patience, you know, and perseverance. Because like you said, sabr is not just patience, it's also perseverance. You know, it's not just patience, it's perseverance. There's a difference. That they have cultivated the root of iman so much that no matter what happens to them, they're like, alhamdulillah. People are attracted to that. Constancy. Very good. No, you can't. No.
So that's why when I was hearing about patience and the way that you went through Imam Ghazali, again, comfort, sabr is not patience.
Yeah.
Long suffering, constant. There's so many different words for that. So me being patient with my sickness today is one kind of patience. 70 years, 100 years
is another kind. This is a great point. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. Jazakallah khair. What is it? Yeah, I think the word there was I think it was mudjarra. Mudjarra. It's like when something is tedious and ongoing. Like the brother said. Yeah, it's like tedious, constant, ongoing, and it bothers you, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, jazakallahu khairan. Then we'll pause here. Put this in the car and give time for